your rights.
I concede. What's the implication of that? Keep going.
Well, is it mostly men or women?
In the military, it's mostly men.
Mostly men. And then in the police force, mostly men, mostly women.
I guess it's mostly men.
Mostly men. In fact, can you think of a single enforcement agency which is not mostly made up of men?
I don't know, maybe the Environmental Protection Agency?
The EPA?
That's an enforcement arm of the government.
Do they actually have an enforcement wing? Because like the IRS does, the IRS has an enforcement arm of the IRS. They carry the whole 9 yards, but that's mostly the agents there, mostly men too.
I'm pretty sure the EPA has to handle permits for businesses that are like polluting a lot.
Yeah, that wouldn't be enforcement though.
That is enforcing a law.
It's not enforcement.
That is enforcing a law.
How is it enforcing?
If there's regulations on how much emissions a company can have, and the EPA is tracking their emissions and charging them or otherwise punishing them, putting them out of business, etc., for breaking those rules, then it's an enforcement of a law.
So if it's enforcement, this requires force that's entailed in the word enforcement.
Yeah,
right?
and
So what force are they using, or are they appealing to another branch to use force?
They're using the institutional force that's within the agency.
Yeah, but if a business says, no,
government.
we're going to keep dumping our oil in this lake, right? Does the EPA themselves actually come out and physically stop them from dumping the oil in the lake, or do they just send them a strongly worded letter is the question?
Probably a strongly worded letter. I think eventually people might come out and do things physically, and yeah, those people would probably be men, but I don't see the point of your argument. It's just an argument that men are physically stronger.
I haven't even made an argument.
Okay.
So I don't see how you can see the point if I haven't even made
I'm not
one
sure
yet.
what you're setting up for, but I'm very curious.
Well, right now I'm just trying to figure out the delineation of who actually enforces the laws themselves, not people who write the laws, not people who make judgments on the laws, but the people who actually enforce the laws.
The government, the institutions that make up the government.
Institutions cannot enforce a law.
Okay.
People have to enforce a law. It's like saying the prison institution will make you go to your cell. The prison institution does not make you go to the cell. A guy with a nightstick makes you go to a cell, right?
But why does he have to do that?
Well, it's his job. He doesn't have to do it.
Who gave him that job?
Well, in this case, it would be the prison.
Is that a government-owned facility?
Sure.
So he has a government job.
Sure.
So he has to whatever the government tells him.
Not the government, the people in the government who are in those institutions who then give him the mandate to do whatever the job is. The institution itself is just a building, right, or an idea. It's a conflation of people. So you're making a category error when you say an institution can enforce.
Okay.
It's people who enforce, and it's people who are the institution.
In the government enforce. And that's mine.
Well, they don't always have to be in the government, right?
Explain yourself.
Well, like you can have a citizen's arrest. You can have, various things like this where there's enforcement going on, but you're not a government agent of any kind. And you can enforce your right to self-defense without being in the government, right?
I disagree. The government is the one that gives us the right to self-defense.
So the government gives us a right to self-defense.
They delineate it, like I said, after the social contract. The people give the government the people give the people in the government the right to enforce it.
Okay. So then last thing is, when it comes to rights themselves, do you think that rights exist?
It's a very interesting topic that you've given to me multiple times. I think, like you've said many times about different axioms and stuff, no, they do not tangibly exist. But because the enforcement of rights has physical repercussions, I'd say that rights are something that exists in various societies, governments, legal codes, constitutions. They're present. But yes, they are intangible.
Concept.
They're intangible.
Yeah, so they're just conceptual.
Yes.
They don't actually exist as part of any type of physical reality. They're just ideas that we will follow.
Same thing with the Bible, but yeah.
I mean, sure, you can say that. I'm just asking specifically. They're just ideas, though, right?
Yes, just like the Bible is just ideas.
Okay, it's just ideas. So if that is the case, then these ideas for rights, which do not exist, and then these men who are mostly enforcing these rights who do exist, men, you would say, would be the rights enforcers. They would have to be. There's mostly men who are enforcing rights, and under this ideal or idealism that you have that we should follow rights, you would need to have people enforcing them. Those are mostly going to be men enforcing rights.
I feel like we've talked in a circle here, and I think the fundamental disagreement is that I believe women are just as capable of men as enforcing rights, and I don't think that physicality is a valid enough argument to argue against it.
So then can you tell me why it is that there's never been a case in the history of all of mankind where women have collectively enslaved, or men, but men have always been able to collectively enslave women?
It's because men are physically stronger.
Well, then what are you talking about? Women are just as equally capable of enforcing their rights.
Because guns are an equalizer.
Yeah, but we've already distinguished that they don't make you equal to a man just because you have a gun.
We disagreed there.
Okay, well then can you explain how somebody's better apt and can carry far more ammunition and handle a weapon better, how it's equal to a person who cannot?
First of all, like we said, there are many exceptions to that case. There are many women who could probably carry more ammunition than a small, weak man.
Yeah, but those would be exceptions, which would make the rule that most women are not as good at it as most men. Also, women do not make guns. They don't create them. They don't manufacture them. They don't draft them. They, for the most part, stay completely out of the industry. There's almost no women working inside of the gun industry as far as the production end of it goes. Some in the sales end, but they don't even produce the weapons. So same thing when you're talking about tanks. Tanks also require a higher amount of physical strength. Male tank crews are going to do better than female tank crews. And this is because you have to put on treads and you have to put in shells and you have to carry heavy shit. So it's not really just saying, well, a woman can carry a gun. I don't really understand the argument because, yes, men also carry guns but can do so much more than that with the guns.
Okay, well, it's just I've proven that women can be enforcers even if it's less well than men can be, right? Would you concede to that?
Yeah, but then that would mean, if that's true, that men can utilize force even against enforcer women and take away their rights. That's the point.
So do you think like a man who is able to escape the grip of a female police officer, you think he's just going to be free for the rest of his life and never get a right, never get it enforced onto him? Yeah.
Men are going to come get him. Men who enforce rights are going to come get him. But generally speaking, yeah, women and men cannot equally enforce rights. There's no, I mean, there's never even been an example of it, ever. It's never happened once. So my argument would be to you that if tomorrow collectively men said women have no rights, they would not. And if collectively women said men have no rights, they still would, because women would be unable to enforce that mandate, whereas men could.
That's false, because they could at least partially enforce it. There would be a war between the genders if we can both own guns.
I don't think that there would be. As if you take a look at some of the historic examples, including overseas, there have been many instances where women can own guns and have guns. But if men take their rights away, what good are your guns? What are you going to do? Collectively, women, there's no possible way for them to put up a fight against men. It can't be done.
And do you think men would take women's rights away tomorrow?
They do it all over the world all the time, don't they?
Then why don't they do it here?
Well, so this is a conflation of two different questions. Whether or not they do it here, we're arguing right now on if they could do it here.
If they could do what? Sorry, I got.
If they could collectivize and just take away women's rights.
Yeah, could they?
Yeah.
Okay. Then why don't they?
Yeah, but that's not, again, asking me why doesn't thing happen doesn't.
I'm just asking you about your opinion at this point.
Has no necessity as
why
to whether
do you
or not
think
it
men
could
don't
happen.
do that? Is it because of the feminist mind virus,
I can
or
get into that?
Okay.
But before I get into that, I still would like this question answered as to whether or not they can do that.
I don't think so, because women are.
Did OBS just crash? Maybe.
It says we're offline.